Hi, I'm Roxy Keller, and this is Baking with Roxy. This is one of my special bakes, not one of the Great British Baking Show challenges. I'm making a birthday cake for a friend of ours. His name is Russ, and I'm making a carrot cake. I'm using a recipe from Preppy Kitchen, and I have used many recipes from this website. It's a great one. He has a lot of great recipes, and he even has a video on making this one. I am going to make just one little change, which he suggests you can do. You can take out some of the vegetable oil from the cake mix and add something like applesauce or pineapple. I'm going to add some crushed pineapple because it's delicious. And this carrot cake, of course, has cream cheese frosting. So I'm going to do 1.5 times the recipe because the cake mix that he has the ingredients for, it will make 2 9-inch round. And I want to make a 9 by 13 with a couple of layers. So I have 2 9 by 13 pans. I've cut out the parchment paper for the bottom, so I'll spray just the corners and the edges with some baking spray, and then these will be ready for the cake batter. I also am going to add pecans. That's in the recipe, and I like to toast my pecans, toast all nuts before you put them in the inside of a mixture because it just really brings out the flavor of the nuts. So I already have the oven preheating to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and I have a baking sheet ready for toasting the pecans. For 1.5 times the recipe, I need 180 grams of pecans. That's 180 grams. I'm going to add a few extra just because they're so delicious. I like to nibble on them as I'm baking. I'm just going to spread these out on the baking sheet and put them in the oven for about 7 minutes. I'll check on them, and really the best way to know they're done is to open the oven and really get a smell of the nuts. If you go too long, they will burn, so you don't want to do that. Into the oven. Of course, for this recipe, I need some shredded carrots, and it's best not to buy previously shredded carrots because they can be a little dry. So I have some baby carrots that I'm going to shred in my food processor. On the Preppy Kitchen website, he purchased 1-pound bundles of large carrots, cleaned off the exterior, and then shredded them using a box grater. So you can do it however you like. The recipe calls for a 1-pound bundle of carrots to be shredded and then weighed out to 315 grams. Since I'm doing 1.5 and this is a 2-pound bag, I'll do about 3/4 of this bag. If I do too much, we can just use the extra shredded on a salad. I want to process these enough that all of the chunks get shredded, but I don't want to go too far because I don't want carrot butter. That looks pretty good. 1.5 times the recipe is 473 grams. So let's see how much I have. Okay, so I do have some left over for salad. Yep, 7 minutes was perfect. So now I'll let these cool. In a large mixing bowl, I'll mix the dry ingredients and for 1.5 times the recipe. 450 grams of all-purpose flour, 3 teaspoons of baking powder, which is about 14 grams, 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda, 7 grams, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 8 grams. At 1.5 times the recipe, that would mean 1.5 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, but I always think it needs more, so I'm adding 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. 1 tablespoon is about 3 teaspoons, so basically I'm doubling the amount of cinnamon. 3/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. That's all of the dry ingredients, so I'll whisk that. Now I'll put the wet ingredients into the bowl of my stand mixer. So I'll start with 330 grams of brown sugar, and he calls for light brown sugar, but I always use dark. It's just a little bit richer. I'm going to use the whisk just to make sure there aren't any chunks of brown sugar. And if there are, I'll crush them up. 300 grams of white granulated sugar. This recipe uses vegetable oil instead of butter, and for 1.5 times the recipe, I need 2 cups, but I'm going to replace 2/3 of the oil with 2/3 of a cup of crushed pineapple that has been drained. 1 1/3 cup, or about 320 or 25 milliliters of vegetable oil. This is crushed pineapple in 100% pineapple juice. So I'm going to strain it into this bowl. We have to strain it because too much juice would affect the texture of the cake. Save this for a snack later. 2/3 of a cup of crushed pineapple that's been drained. I'm going to mix this with the paddle attachment until blended. 6 large eggs at room temperature. 2 teaspoons of vanilla. I'm adding vanilla bean paste. With the mixer running, I'll add the eggs one at a time. Okay, now, unlike other cakes I've done where I've slowly added in the dry ingredients, the Preppy Kitchen recipe says to slowly add the wet ingredients to the dry and blend very gradually and very tenderly so that you don't develop any gluten. And he does all of that by hand, so I'll give it a try. First, I want to make sure that I have all of the sugar and the other ingredients up from the bottom of the bowl. So these are my dry ingredients. I'm going to add about half of the wet ingredients and fold them in gently. And if you recall from a previous video, I use the 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock, scoop from the bottom, lift up, flip, and turn my bowl 1/4 of a turn. And I'm going to do that a few times until the dry ingredients start to become incorporated. 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, dig up from underneath and flip, 1/4 turn. Now I'm going to add the other half of the wet ingredients. And we're not folding this because we need to keep in the, air that we've whipped into eggs or anything like that. It's because we don't want to develop the gluten in the flour. So he says to stop just before all of the dry ingredients disappear. And now we'll add the carrots and the pecans, and as we fold those in, the rest of this flour will get incorporated. First, I want to chop the pecans, and I could use the food processor, but I like the pecans to have a little bit of size to them. I don't want them crushed too small. I'll add 180 grams of chopped toasted pecans. And the rest I'll have for a snack. And now the carrots. This is 473 grams of shredded carrots. My batter weighs 2,586 grams, so I'm going to divide that in 2, and that's $12.93 into each pan. I'll probably just put like $12.85 in each one, just because some always gets left behind. There's one. Okay, now these are ready to go into the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 30 minutes. I'll check them with a toothpick in the center, make sure it comes out clean. That way I'll know they're done. After I stick these in the oven, I'm going to clean a couple of bowls and then make the cream cheese frosting. For the cream cheese frosting, into the bowl of my stand mixer, I'll start with 4 sticks of butter at room temperature. I'll blend the butter with the paddle attachment until soft and smooth and creamy. Now I'll add 2 blocks or 16 ounces of cream cheese at room temperature and mix this until fluffy. 2 teaspoons of vanilla. I'm going to scrape the sides and the bottom. Now I need to add anywhere from 700 to 900 grams of powdered sugar, depending on how thick I want it. So I'm going to sift that amount into this bowl and then add it after it's sifted. While I was sifting the powdered sugar, I checked on the cakes and they were done after 27 minutes. So they're on the cooling racks and they need to cool completely. And while that's happening, I'm going to start adding powdered sugar to my butter cream cheese mixture. We'll see how much I need. So it's pretty creamy at this point, which is great for covering and filling. I might just cover the cake with it at this texture and then put a little bit more powdered sugar in to do some decorations. It's delicious. Not too sweet, just good. I'm going to go ahead and add the Russ. There's not that much left, so I'm going to go ahead and just add it. All right, that's ready to ice the cake. One more thing I'm going to do is try to make a couple of little decorations for the top, like maybe make some little carrots out of royal icing. I have this royal icing left over from when I made the meringue sculpture. I used it for glue. So I need to thicken it up a little bit, and then I'll try to make some little shapes. So I'm going to put it in this bowl and add some powdered sugar. Feels a little thick, but I think that's just because it's cold. So I'm adding some powdered sugar to thicken it up a little bit. If it gets too thick, I can always add a little bit of milk, water, which I think I'm going to have to do. Put a little bit too much. The cakes cooled down enough that I could touch them underneath. So I went ahead and put them in the refrigerator just to help them cool down because the party is today, so I need to make sure that cake's cooled and ready to be frosted. I'm going to take a little bit of this royal icing and put it in a separate bowl and color it with some orange. And another one with green. Into a pastry bag, I'm going to put a tip coupler because I'm not sure what size tip I'm going to want. Typically for decorating cookies and things with royal icing, you'll just cut a little hole in the tip of your pastry bag. And I could do that, but again, not sure what size hole I want. So this way, I have options. I'm going to pipe these onto a piece of parchment paper that's on this cookie sheet. That way, if I need to put it in the freezer or the refrigerator, I can. So a couple of dollops of icing will help this stay still. I always cut this plastic just right where the threads start. If I cut it too far this way, then the frosting can start coming around the sides of the coupler. Oop. I'm going to try this number 3 hole. Oof. This is a number 2 tip. Why don't I practice on one of... While I was waiting for them to harden, I made these candied pecans. I thought if I have little carrots and little pecans, then that's an indication of what's in the cake. I just followed a recipe called Easy Candied Pecans from Inspired Taste. Pretty much followed the recipe, but I didn't put the cayenne pepper in, and I think they turned out pretty good. Okay, it's time to assemble and frost this cake. I have a 9 by 13 cardboard cake plate, and I'm just going to flip the cake out onto this cake board, and then to carry it over to their house, I'll put the cake inside of a cake carrier. I heard it drop, so there it is. Remove the parchment paper. Don't want to forget that. It is brown because of all of the sugar in the cake. I have my turntable here, and I put a piece of shipping tape so that that will stay still while I'm trying to ice it. Okay, let's go. With an offset spatula, I want to spread it so that I have plenty around the edges. So that when I put the other layer on and it's time to do the sides, there's plenty of frosting there. This time I'm not going to skimp on the filling or on the frosting on the top. My only concern is always that when I put the other layer on, it's going to smush this one down and squish the frosting out the sides, but I guess we'll see. Now the other layer. I think I'm going to go with kind of a rustic finish. I don't think it needs to be perfect. I think it'll look better if it's more natural. The trick is to make it look intentionally rustic and not messy. So I have a wet paper towel wrapped around my spatula. I'm just using this to clean off the board. With the frosting I have left, I'm I'm going to add some more powdered sugar to make sure it's nice and stiff so that I can put on a few decorations and write happy birthday. I have some of the cream cheese frosting that I thickened up with some more powdered sugar. I'm going to add some blue food coloring so that I can write happy birthday. This is called royal blue, but I think I need more. Ooh, this one's called navy. I want it to be darker. Yeah, that's a nice blue. Before I add the other decorations, I'm going to write happy birthday, Russ. And that way, if I have some swirls or something that sort of go over the letters or close to the letters, it's easier to do the writing first and have that over top corners or edges of the writing than it is to have those in there and then try to avoid bumping into them. If that makes sense. Okay, so I have been debating whether I wanted to put these on the cake or not, and I asked my husband. He said no. He thinks it'll take away from the cake. So the only other option is to try to draw a carrot right on the cake. But if I mess it up, it's really hard to get it off. Okay, I'm doing it. I think that's okay. I think it's good. Okay, I'm done. We'll take this to the party this afternoon, and hopefully everyone will like it. Hopefully it's good. um, that's the end of this episode of Baking with Roxy. Thank you for joining me. And next time, I will be doing the technical challenge up from the Great British Baking Show. And it's to make ginger snaps and to do some royal icing decorations on top. So I'll get lots of practice doing that the next time. And I'll make 2 different textures of royal icing, a thick one and a thin one, and lots of colors to decorate the cookies. So I hope you'll join me. Please subscribe and have a good day. Bye.